So today we're doing a video on how I make the pies. A lot of people have asked me how I make the crust. The bottom one is a simple, just basic pie crust. I mean, you're just pretty much going to level it out. I use a mat that actually has the measurements. So it has a 16-inch, 10-inch pie, 9-inch, 8-inch, 7-inch tortilla, stuff like that. The reason I use these pans is just easier to get the measurements. But you're going to cut off the remainder on the pie plate, so it doesn't really matter. I usually use a glass pie plate when I'm using it for myself. When I'm making it for friends, like this one's going to my best friend's house, I use the aluminum ones. And that way, when they don't return it, it's totally okay. I'm going to go ahead and start pounding it down with my hands and making sure that I actually start making it into a circle. You don't have to worry about it being perfect because you're going to cut it at the end anyway. The top is actually the most important part of the crust. The bottom part is easy. So pretty much I'm just going to go ahead and with my hands, I'm going to go ahead and mush it so that it makes the first circle and it fits inside the middle one. Once I get that, then you're going to use the rolling pin and you're just going to start rolling it out. The reason I use gloves, you don't have to use gloves. With your hands, it's so much better being able to feel the dough so you can see if you have any clumps or anything. It's hard with gloves, but as a celiac, I'm trying not to swallow a lot of dough because of the flour. So if I use my hands bare, I get a lot of it in between my nails and stuff. So I use gloves to make it for my family because they love the pies. So this is how you start it off. I have it in a circle. Then you're going to use your rolling pin and you're going to actually go in directions. So you're going to go 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and you're going to keep doing that around and around until you level it out. I'm going to actually pause the video now so that it doesn't become a really long video of watching me do it little by little. So I'm going to pause it now and come back when it's actually a full pie. As you're doing the whole thing with the rolling pin, I want to remind everybody, you want to every so often, you want to pick up your dough and just flip it over. You want to do that for 2 reasons. Number one, you want to just make sure that when you do it, you're feeling the length and the width of your dough because you don't want a pie crust at the bottom to be too thick. Another reason being is you want to make sure it's not sticking. I don't try to put too much flour on and getting everything full of flour because of my condition and I don't want to swallow it all. So I try to use the board, the waxing paper here, the mat, without having to use a lot of flour. So lifting it every so often and flipping it will really help because that way you know if it's not sticking. You don't want to get to the end when it's all shaped and having to start over because it's stuck to the thing. I'm going to pause it again and just finish it up and I'll be right back. Okay, now the dough is pretty much flattened out. As I can tell you guys, it doesn't have to be a perfect circle. I'm not a pastry chef. This isn't something I do professionally. So for me, it just never ever comes out round. When I watch things online, I wonder if they cut it before or how they do it. But for me, it just never comes out into a perfect circle, which is perfectly fine because that's not what I'm looking for. What you're going to do now is you're going to use the actual rolling pin and you're going to grab the edge of the dough and you're going to roll it up. The reason that you do it this way is because it's so much easier to hold the dough so that you don't actually break it. Then that way, when you put the pan down, you slowly just use your rolling pin and that way you can roll it right back onto the pan. There's going to be times like now where it's not going to land perfectly. So then I use my fingers slowly without breaking the pastry. And I start moving it around so it actually covers the pastry dish. And that's when you're going to start organizing it inside. You're going to actually lift it slowly and you're going to make sure that you're covering the inside, gently tucking it. You're going to make sure you lower it in. And you're going to keep doing that until you cover the pan completely. You want to make sure that there's pastry hanging out all sides of the dish. Reason being is if you're doing one of the pies that has a big cover on the top, they're going to unite on the side and you're going to clench them together. I actually do a lattice pie. So with that, I cut it into little strips and stuff. So I just need the edge to be hanging over so that it adjusts accordingly. And at the end, I can tuck the dough in. So that's how you completely cover your pan. Then after that, you're going to use a small scissor. You can use pastry scissors. You can use any kind of design scissors you want. I let my daughter sometimes play with it and cut the edges with like different scissors that have different shapes and stuff. And what you're going to do is you're going to cut all the remaining dough that's falling off the edge, right? And you're going to do that and you're going to actually put the dough and the pan back in the freezer just like this after you cut everything extra. You're going to put it in the freezer while you're working on the top layer of the dough. I'm going to pause it again while I finish cutting everything extra, and I'll be right back. One important thing when you're cutting off the excess dough around the edges is you want to use both your hands going around the pan, and you want to go like this, making sure that it's not too thick. You want to make sure that you're not leaving too much thickness because as you're pulling down and pushing against, sometimes you're bringing up dough, and you're going to get a thick mound of dough at the top of the pan. The reason you don't want that to happen is when somebody bites into a pie or they cut a piece, you don't want them to have a giant thick piece of crust. I mean, I make the crust with juice inside of it, and I use sugar and cinnamon. That way the crust isn't a boring crust that doesn't have taste. But at the same time, you don't want somebody to get an awful huge piece of crust. See, now that I leveled it all out and I know all my edges are exactly the same consistency, I'm going to go ahead and continue just cutting around and taking off all the excess dough. And don't think you're wasting this dough. This dough is actually what we're going to use with the dough that we have in the fridge. You'll understand that when you read the recipe. When you make the dough, you're actually dividing it in two pieces. One is for the bottom of the pie and one is for the top of the pie. But when we take it out, we're going to combine the dough that we have left, all the pieces that we have left that we've cut off, and we're going to actually combine that to have enough to make all the work that we're going to do on top of the pie. And don't think this is actually complicated, because this is not. It's really easy, and it's actually, for me, it's a lot of fun. I like making pies. I like doing the work. It kind of combines the whole cooking with the creativity of being artistic at the same time. So for me, I mean, I can do pies all day if I had to. So it's a lot of fun. I'm going to pause again now that I'm cutting the edges. This pie is going to go in the freezer. It's going to sit in the freezer for a little bit while I'm working on the top pieces. That way you don't have a soggy crust when it goes into the oven. Some people like actually baking it in the oven before putting in the ingredients. I've tried both ways and I really don't like it. It does make the bottom really, really crunchy. But if you're one of those that really likes the bottom of the pie, I'm sorry, to have that consistency, you want to go ahead and bake it now in the oven at 425 for just 5 to 10 minutes just to get a set heat on the bottom. I don't actually like doing that, so that's just me. But like I said, some pastry chefs actually do it that way. For me, this is going to go straight into the freezer now. The bottom part is complete. And once I finish cutting all the strands that I need for the top, that's actually when I'll take this one out of the freezer. And we'll be back in a minute when we start the top. So now we have the second ball of dough. The first pie crust is inside the freezer, just getting hard again. This one has been in the fridge for about an hour now. So it's still a little bit rough. But that's what you're trying to do. When you look at the recipe, you're going to notice that when you're making the dough, you're actually using a pastry cutter to actually work the butter, cold butter, into the flour, and you're using ice cold water, or I use ice cold fruit juice, to actually make the dough. Because of that, that's the reason you're going to get the flakiness, because that dough is actually working into the pieces of butter that were worked in. So you want to try your best to not let this dough get too hot at any time that you're working with it. Because once that happens and the butter becomes part of the flour, then you're no longer going to have that flaky consistency anymore. So now we're going to work on this one the same way we did with the other one. We're going to start flattening it down and make it into a circle. Then we're going to use the rolling pin to make it out into a big giant pie. This one doesn't have to be that thick. That is completely up to you. How much crust you want at the top of your pie is actually what's going to determine how much you actually level this out. A lot of people like thick crust at the top. A lot of people like it light. So you want to make sure that you know exactly what kind of pie you're headed towards, what you like, what consistency, before you actually make it. I like it semi-medium. So you'll notice that this crust, I'm actually going to use the rolling pin to flatten it a lot less than I did the bottom. The bottom I wanted really thin, but the top I actually wanted to have some consistency. Plus this looks really pretty when people take it out of the dish. It actually shows that top layer of crust on it. So I'm going to pause it again. I'm going to start using the rolling pin to roll it out exactly how I explained, 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and we'll be back in a minute when it's all rolled out. Okay, so now I've flattened the whole dough. This is the consistency that I like. I know you can't really see it, but I kind of like it on a thin consistency, but not too thin. Another thing that I do is when I first started making these pies, I used to use a pizza slicer, and that would actually cut the slices for me. I've learned now that it's so much easier to use a big knife, a big sharp knife like this one. Reason being, it has a long length, so I can cut all the length. And for some reason, when I use the pizza, I can't go straight. And don't worry 100% about the lines being straight. I used to worry about that all the time. At the end of the day, once it goes in the oven and it enlarges itself a little bit and the flaky crust gets bigger, it's not going to matter if they're not perfect or if they are. I'm going to go ahead and cut 8 on each side. I like a consistency of 16 pieces to do the top of the pie. Sometimes they don't all fit, sometimes they do. But the reason I cut it straight down the middle is that I could do 8 and 8. It does not have to be a perfect circle. Remember, you're working on the top of the crust now. So now you actually don't want a circle. You want to go more in a rectangular direction because you want these long strips. I'm going to teach you what to do with the extra dough when we're done, because after this, you're also going to have a lot of leftover dough. And there's these really cool ideas that you can use with muffin pans and stuff with these ingredients. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this out, and I'll be back in a minute. Okay, so we have 16 pieces cut out. Like I said, they don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be beautiful. Guys, if you're doing this professionally, then this is the wrong video to watch. I do it for fun. I do it for friends. They taste good. I enjoy making them, and they're pretty. So they're not perfect, but here you have 16 cut pieces because you're going to try to go 8 across and 8 over. We're going to go ahead and grab the pie now. I'm going to set these to the side, and I'm going to put the pie in the center now instead. And that way we're going to go through the process of actually decorating the pie. Okay, as an example today, we're using cherry pie. My best friend Athena wanted a cherry pie, so I'm actually making her this one while I make the video. That way, you know, kill 2 birds with 1 stone. The filling is already in. Notice it's almost right to the edge. With this kind of pie, it doesn't really matter. You don't want to go over though, only if you're making like an apple pie and you're doing a full cover pastry. When you're doing the actual, you know, lines and stuff, you want to go ahead and make sure that it's kind of leveled. And it's going to look really pretty because as it starts bubbling and stuff, it's going to start popping through the little holes in the layers. I'm going to go ahead and pause a minute, and I'm going to go ahead and start the lattice. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start right in the center. So you're going to take a big strand, and you're going to go right through the center of the pie. Okay, you're going to let it hang. At this point, you're not going to tuck it. You're not going to squeeze down. You're literally just going to put it down. That way, if you change your mind about where you want anything, you can go ahead and rearrange it. You try not to do that with cherry pie a lot for the simple reason that cherry pie stains the the dough, sorry. Same kind of concept when you're making dough. So when you go ahead and put it, you don't want to have to remove it afterwards because what's going to happen is it's going to have a tinting on the other side of cherry. You go ahead and layer 8 of them, however you want. I try to make it as tight together as I can. I have an assistant, Emily and Mumu. Mumu's actually the one videotaping, that's my daughter. And Emily is handing me supplies and helping me with stuff. So far we've set 5. Doesn't have to be even. I prefer to put 16, but it doesn't always work out that way, so I'm not really worried about it. I just want to make sure that I have enough. So I've put 6 so far, so I want to put 1 more here. And see, you can easily just move it over gently and just lift it. You don't want to do too much movement because of the cherry staining on it. So I'm going to move this middle one just a little bit and keep moving because I want to be able to fit 8. Maybe it's an OCD thing, I don't know, but for some reason when I started baking pies, I just started with 8. Another thing I don't like is this one's really thin, so I don't want to use that one for that. So I'm going to go ahead and grab another one and substitute it for that one, giving it a space right there between them. Then I'm going to go ahead and grab the last one for the 8, and I'm going to go ahead and put it right here. So that way, now you have a total of 8. Okay? Now what you're going to do is, you want to cut some extra. So Emily is going to hand me the scissor, even though she's extremely distracted right now. I found it. It's okay. It's right here. And we're going to go ahead and cut a little bit. You don't want to have too much hanging off, but you want to leave some hanging off, and I'll explain the reason. So we're going to cut some, so it's not too extremely long. And you're actually going to start using your memory for this. As you get older, for some reason, you know, I'm starting to forget stuff. So I have to pay close attention, and you'll see me like counting in my head and stuff. You got all 8, and you're going to start 1 up, second one up, skip 1, up, skip 1, up. And what you're going to do is, you're going to make sure that they're kind of even. And now you're going to take another piece of the dough, and you're going to go right sideways. Right? And you're going to lower them. Back down. I mean, you don't want to worry about getting cherry over everything. I prefer it to look really pretty when it's done. That's just me. But like I said, if it gets full of cherry, I mean, it's not the end of the world. It is a cherry pie. So now remember, we lifted these, so now they're on top. Now you're going to do the opposite. This was the first one we lifted when we started. Now we're going to go this one, skip 1, skip 1, skip 1. And now we're going to put another piece across. I'm going to put it right there. Same concept. Down, 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 down. And now we're gonna go back to where we started. One up, skip one up, skip one up, skip one up. Now we're gonna put another piece right there. And we're gonna go back down again. And that's pretty much all you're doing. It's just a little bit of work just to get them to stay open. Then the last one, again, this one, this one, this one, and this one. And you're gonna put the last piece across on this side. We're gonna go down, and down, and down. I'm gonna pause just a second. I'm gonna cut these edges off and I'll be right back. Okay, so I cut the extra stands on this side. I also replaced one of the pieces of dough. If you look right here, this piece right here, the one that was there before, was really, really thin. I didn't like how it looked and it was gonna make it a little bit more complicated. So I went ahead and I moved it. You can play with it and make it look however you want. Like I said, it doesn't have to be perfect, but you know, you can work with it however you like. I'm gonna go ahead now and do the same thing I did on the other side on this side. I'm just gonna cut some extra pieces of the dough, just so I have less to work with and I don't have to be lifting so much dough so that it makes a mess everywhere. Save the extra dough that you have and start, oops, I dropped it in. Start bundling it up and just putting it on the side. We're gonna use it later on for something else. So go ahead and you're gonna start on this side. Now you're gonna notice this piece right here had something going over it. So the next one shouldn't go over it. So this is the one we're gonna lift. And it starts the same way. If you started on the other side on that first one, it's gonna work out the same way. You wanna go as far back to make it kind of even so that you have kind of a line going sideways. And you're gonna go ahead and grab the piece of the dough. And once again, you're gonna start doing the same thing you did on the other side. You're gonna go sideways and then down. Oops, these two stuck together. Go this way, go this way, and go this way. Then you're gonna do the same thing. You're gonna go, now we're gonna start with the other ones. Lift them up and put the next piece of pasta. Well, I don't know why I keep calling it pasta. Maybe because that's what's on my mind right now. You know, using the dough to actually make the strips and stuff. Gonna go ahead and do that again. I'm gonna pause just a second. I actually need a little bit more flour on the dough because they're kind of sticking with me. I'll be right back. Okay, we're finishing up the last two pieces. I apologize that I have to keep pausing. I have allergies. I live in Georgia, so the allergies are killing me and I keep on having like these little cough sessions. And I don't want to cough on the pie, so I walk away for a little bit when I know I'm going to cough. I'm putting actually the last piece on. So we kind of fast forwarded it a little bit while I was gone. And we went ahead and put up the last pieces just to shorten the video a little bit so it doesn't have to keep going. That's the last piece. So if you notice, there's 8 across, 8 up and down. So that's pretty much, you have everything latticed perfectly. Now what we're going to do next is you're going to go and you're going to start using the edges using a scissor, which Emily's going to hand me as soon as she's not distracted with the phone. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to take off the edges. But you're not taking it off all the way. Notice I left a little bit hanging because you're going to use that and you're going to curl it up. And that way you form like a little layer at the top. Keep using the pieces that you have left over of dough. Keep putting it to the side. Don't get rid of it. Like I said, there's a reason for the madness. If you have kids and stuff and you want to make like little tarts and stuff, what I'm going to do next, and I'm going to show it on the same video just because it's already on there, is I'm going to take a tin pan, a muffin pan, and I'm going to go ahead and use the extra dough. And I'm going to put some apples with cinnamons and stuff, just like if I'm making the apple pies. And I'm just going to make like these little tarts with the extra dough. That way it doesn't go to waste. But just so you know, you can always freeze the dough for 2 weeks. So it can be used and it can be used for a while. So always keep that in mind as well. I'm going to pause a second just to get my hands clean. I have cherry on them and I'll be right back. The reason I did that was when you're going to squeeze against the sides. On my gloves I had some cherry juice from actually touching the pieces that had cherry leaking. You want to go ahead and you're going to tuck the edges. So you're going to use your fingers going around and you're actually going to squeeze off the excess dough this time with your fingers. So you're squeezing down on the dough, and as you notice, it slides off the extra dough. You're going to do that the entire way around the pie. So you're actually going like this, and with your fingers, you're kind of cutting it. You don't have to use a scissor or a knife. It's actually better this way because the pressure that you're putting down to pull apart the dough is actually what's putting the imprint on the edge of the dough. See, I pretty much went around and I squished everything down. There was a hole here in the middle of the dough. And what I did was I took a little piece of the dough that was left, one of the little pieces that I cut, and I kind of squeezed it in under. You're going to notice when dough is raw, when we put the egg wash, it's all going to kind of stick to itself. So that hole will actually disappear because now I kind of played the dough into there. And when we stick it in the oven, it's kind of rise together. So you're not going to even notice that hole that was there at one point. So you can play with your dough however you want while you're making it. You can adjust it if you think one piece is too thin. I mean, if you look back at the beginning of the video, you'll notice there's times that I've gone back when I've been on pause. And I've actually like changed a couple of them that it just annoyed me that it was kind of small and stuff. That's just me. This is more for fun, guys. Remember, this is your baking. This is your fun. A lot of people just ask me, they wanted to make this. I guess our camera girl, my daughter, had some kind of camera issue. We're going to pause a second before she falls off the table, and we'll be right back. Okay, now we're going to stick the pie in the oven. Before you do that, you're going to make an egg wash. Egg wash is simple. It's just a beaten egg and 2 tablespoons of water. You're actually going to go ahead and just cover the entire piece of the pie. Everything with the egg wash. Start with the edges. This is what's going to give it that brown, pretty glaze at the end. You'll notice that with cherry pies, blueberries, there's juice that's going to get on the egg wash. Don't worry about that. Like I said, unless you're making a professional pie or you're doing it, for some photography class or something, doesn't really matter. I mean, it is a cherry pie, so it's going to have cherry juice in it. So just go ahead and coat all the layers. And once you coat it all, you're going to go ahead and stick it in the oven. You're going to cook it for 40 minutes at 425. You want to keep an eye on it. Sometimes it depends on your oven whether or not, your pie is going to get too dark. I know there's been times that I've made it, in different ovens, and 425 for 40 minutes has still burnt the pie. So you want to make sure that you kind of play with it. So after 35 minutes, start keeping an eye on it. You want to just touch the top. The inside is already cooked, so you're not worried about anything being raw when it comes to the ingredients inside. But you want to make sure that the dough is actually cooked. What you're going to do is just pretty much touch it. You're going to notice with your hands whether or not it's crunchy, whether or not it's flaking already. And that way you'll know if the pie is done. Sometimes the sauce, I'm not going to lie, is going to come right through the cracks. So you're going to have cherry escaping through the pastry. One day when I actually, have more time, I'll actually show you guys how to make the dough on video. It's the cutting process that actually confuses people. They think that they have to get the butter really worked into that flour, and you don't. So now that's pretty much egg washes everywhere all over the dough. We're going to go ahead and stick this in the oven for 40 minutes, and we'll be back. Bobby, have this. Okay, so here we took out the pie out of the oven, so it's complete. You'll notice that it's a little bit crispy. It's flaked up, so the dough has risen, and it's gotten the flakes inside of it. This is a cherry pie. I know it looks dark, so it may look like it's blueberry in the video. If you use canned cherries, it'll be bright red. That's because they add flavoring. I don't know if you guys ever notice when you go to the supermarket and you buy cherries, they're one color, but in a can, and maraschino cherries, completely different. I use only fresh cherries. I don't use the bottled ones or the canned ones. So that's why you're going to see this is the natural colors of cherries, is that they're not supposed to be a bright red. They're supposed to be a purplish reddish color. You could buy the sour ones if you want to make a sour tart cherry pie. I use the sweet cherry pies from my best friend Athena. We'll be delivering this one tonight when my son gets out of work. But as you can see, it's crispy. The edges are perfect. Some of the juice escaped on the edges. That's absolutely fine. I mean, if you take it out of the aluminum and you want it to stick by itself, it can. So you can actually display it and just cut off the aluminum part, and you can actually display the pie inside something else if you don't want to put it in a pie tin. Sorry. Inside the tin is awesome. It's easier to serve. It's easier to eat out of. I mean, I've seen people take a fork to these things. So it's up to you. But then again, this is the complete pie. We're going to go ahead and take a few seconds, and I'm going to show you what to do with all the extra dough that you have. Okay, so basically what I'm doing is I'm playing with the dough. I'm rolling it out really thin, and I'm putting it in muffin cups. And basically what's going to happen is I use a plate, a bowl. I haven't found the cookie cutter that's this wide, that's why. So I use this, and I cut it out while I'm kneading the dough and rolling it out. And I make these little cups in the muffin things. And I made a combination of my apple pie recipe, but instead of slicing the apples, I actually cut them in half. And by cutting them in half, it makes it a smaller thing, so it makes like a little dumpling. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you guys what I'm gonna do is I already took the dough and I put it in and I kind of flattened it around the edges. And now I'm taking the stuffing, the same one that I used for the apple pie, and I'm just stuffing some inside. I'm not putting a cover for this. I mean, you can, because you could actually take the same sides of the dough and kind of just push it over like this. And you're going to kind of make like a little pocket. It's like a little dumpling with apple pie inside. And that's what you can do with your extra stuffing. With your extra stuffing of apple pie, what you do with your extra dough. Anything that you have left over, guys, improvise. And let me tell you something. There's so many uses for muffin pans. I mean, I make my breakfast cups with them. I mean, you can make little quiches. You can make little dumplings. But you'll see when these come out, they're already folded in like this. Once I take them out of the oven, I'm going to put the egg wash on, of course, first. Put them in the oven for like 30 minutes, the same time that you put the oven, 425 for the pies. And you're just going to put them in. And when you get out, you're going to see, I'm going to take a picture of them afterwards. I'll post them on my Facebook. Also post them on the site. And you're going to see that it's just going to create a little dumpling with apple inside. With places like my house where the apple pie goes like so fast, these actually are really good. And if you stick to natural ingredients, apple pie ingredients, you use like the apple. You can use, you know, Splenda. You can use brown sugar to make it healthier. Cinnamon, nutmeg. You know what ingredients you're using. You also know what ingredients you have in the flour. So this is something that's actually healthy. I would trust my kids eating something like this than going out and having a Twinkie or an apple pie, you know, that they sell at the gas station. There's no preservatives in this. You made it yourself. You put it in the oven. You squeezed it in. I mean, let's be honest, guys. When your kids buy stuff at the store for 50, 75 cents, $1.29, they don't care what it looks like. So if you want to make these little dumplings with the extra dough and with the extra apple pie stuffing, go right ahead, because this is something healthy for your kids. And yes, it's sugary, yes, it's sweet, and yes, it is a dessert, but it's healthy. So make this for them, and that way they can have something to eat after school, or they could just eat it as a snack during the summer. Thank you guys for following. If you have any questions, once again, the website is www.supermommeals.com. I'm also on Facebook at facebook.com/4 Supermom Meals. You can go ahead and send me messages, send me ideas, send me requests. If there's something you want to see, guys, go ahead and message me. I know that today the pie, I had a friend on Facebook that asked me how I do the work on top of the crust, and she wanted just an example of how it was done. Once again, these aren't professional videos. Like I said, my cameraman is my 11-year-old daughter. My assistant is her 11-year-old best friend. So this isn't something professional, not something that we're doing for a living, but we're just helping super moms like me who have to work all the time and cook for their kids and cook for their family come up with crazy, innovative ideas to just keep it simple. Thank you, guys. Thank you for following.